It was supposed to be a night of celebration, a simple anniversary drive with my husband Richard, planned by our son Nathan and his wife Amanda. We had no reason to suspect anything. We had trusted them, loved them, raised Nathan with all the sacrifice and devotion parents could give. But in one shocking moment, everything shattered. The car slowed as we reached the bridge, its metal rails glowing faintly under the moonlight. Nathan's voice was calm, almost too calm. Amanda sat beside him, her silence heavier than the night air. And then, without warning, hands shoved us. The world spun. The cold bite of air filled my lungs, and in an instant, Richard and I were plunging into darkness. The impact was brutal. My body screamed with pain, blood trickling down my face. I struggled to move, to understand, to scream Nathan's name. But before I could, Richard's hand clutched mine with desperate strength. His voice, ragged and urgent, hissed into my ear, "Don't move, play dead." I froze. Through the ringing in my ears, I heard the faint echo of footsteps above. Nathan's voice carried down, sharp and cruel, making sure we were gone. My own son, the boy I nursed, the boy I stayed awake for when he had fevers, the boy I worked 3 jobs to raise, stood above me, confirming my death. I lay still, trembling, my heart breaking louder than my bones. The car engine roared, tires screeched, and then, silence. They were gone. And in that silence, Richard turned to me. His breathing was shallow, his eyes full of a pain I had never seen before. He didn't comfort me. He didn't explain what Nathan had done. Instead, he whispered a secret he had carried for 40 years, a secret so devastating that in that moment, I felt the betrayal of my son collapse into the deeper betrayal of my husband. That night, I didn't just lose my son. I lost the man I thought I knew, the life I thought I lived, and the truth I thought I could hold on to. I am telling you this story not because I want sympathy, but because betrayal is a wound every one of us fears. And sometimes, it doesn't come from strangers. It comes from the people we would give our last breath to protect. If you believe family betrayal is the deepest kind of pain, I want you to do 3 things right now. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Because what I'm about to share with you is not just my story. It's a story about trust, survival, and the cost of secrets that refuse to stay buried. I raised Nathan on my own. From the moment he was born, I knew my life had changed forever. I worked long hours, sometimes 2 jobs at once, just to make sure he had clothes that fit, meals that filled him, and a home that felt safe. Every scraped knee, every feverish night, every tear he cried, I was there, always. I didn't do it for praise or recognition. I did it because I loved him more than I loved myself. Our small house in the suburbs wasn't much, but it was ours. Every corner held memories of sacrifice and care. I remember the nights I stayed up late, sewing his clothes because I couldn't afford to buy new ones. I remember the weekends I spent helping him build little forts in the yard or teaching him how to ride his bike without training wheels. Richard helped when he could, but I was the one who carried the weight most days, and I did it gladly. Nathan was more than just my son. He was my pride. I watched him grow, celebrated his successes, comforted him in failures. I took joy in the small things. His first day of school, the time he won the spelling bee, the first time he called me from a payphone to say, "I love you, Mom." Those moments made all the long nights and hard work feel worthwhile. But as Nathan grew older, something changed. Not immediately, not in a way that was easy to notice, but subtle. A glance that lingered too long, a secretive smile, a phone call he took in private. I chalked it up to adolescence, to the natural distance that sometimes grows between mother and child. I tried to ignore it. I told myself he was still my boy, still the same child I had raised with care and love. Even with those small shadows, I held on to pride. Nathan was polite, charming, and smart. He had a way of making people feel like he understood them, like he truly listened. I thought I had prepared him for life, that my lessons of honesty and respect would guide him through the world. I never imagined that one day, those same lessons would be tested, not by strangers, not by coworkers, but by the son I carried in my heart every day. I remember the evenings we would sit together in the living room. He would tell me about his day, his dreams, the things that scared him. I listened, always, even when I was exhausted from work. Those talks were our bond, unbreakable or so I thought. Richard sometimes teased me, saying I spoiled him. But I didn't care. I wasn't raising a perfect child. I was raising the boy I loved. And yet, beneath all that love, I started to notice cracks. Nathan was a teenager, then a young adult, and certain shadows began to stretch longer. He would disappear for hours without explanation. He grew secretive about friends I hadn't met, places I hadn't seen. I asked questions, gently, but he would brush them off with a smile or a shrug. My heart ached with worry, but I also reminded myself that some distance is normal between a mother and her adult child. I wanted to trust him. Had to. All the sleepless nights, the sacrifices, the love poured into his every step, it demanded trust. And for a while, it was enough. But sometimes, in the quiet of my bedroom at night, I would lie awake thinking, what if I was wrong? What if something is happening that I can't see? I didn't have answers. I only had the unease that sometimes settles in a mother's chest when her child carries secrets. Despite the subtle unease, I held onto the bond we had. Nathan laughed easily around me, joked about silly things, and would sometimes rest his head on my shoulder like he did when he was little. Those moments reminded me of the trust and love we had built, the long years of care and sacrifice. It made me believe that no matter what shadows were forming, the foundation of our relationship was strong. Our home became a sanctuary, not just for Nathan, but for all of us. Every corner held memories of birthday parties, holiday dinners, and quiet nights spent reading together. I had spent decades making sure it was a place of warmth and security. I never imagined that the very walls that protected us could become the stage for betrayal. And yet, even as I looked at Nathan and smiled, I couldn't shake the feeling that something fragile was hiding beneath the surface. A whisper of unease that I didn't fully understand. A warning that maybe, just maybe, the boy I loved so fiercely wasn't the boy I thought I knew. Those years of raising him, of working, loving, and protecting, were more than just memories. They were a shield. Little did I know that the strength I had built over decades would be tested in ways I could never have imagined. And when that day came, when betrayal arrived in the form of my own son and his wife, I would need every ounce of that strength to survive. Have you ever felt the uneasy shadow of a secret in someone you love most? I think every parent has. But nothing could prepare me for what Nathan would do, the secret he would hide, or the moment when all that love and pride would be tested in a single, horrifying instant. I still remember the first day Nathan brought Amanda home. He had called me earlier that week, his voice full of excitement, saying, "Mom, I want you to meet someone special." My heart lit up at those words. As a mother, you want your child to find love, to build a life that's full and safe. I spent years praying that Nathan would meet a woman who cared for him the way I did. When Amanda stepped through my front door, she was polite enough on the surface. She smiled, shook my hand, and even complimented the pie I had baked that day. But beneath the smile, there was something colder. Her eyes darted around the house, scanning the furniture, the pictures on the walls, the little details of the life Richard and I had built. It wasn't the look of curiosity. It was the look of someone taking inventory. I tried to ignore it. I told myself I was being too critical, too protective. After all, she was young, maybe nervous. I poured tea, asked about her family, her work, her dreams. She answered, but her words felt rehearsed, as though she was reading lines from a script. Every now and then, when Nathan wasn't looking, she gave me a small, tight-lipped smile that felt more like a warning than a gesture of warmth. Still, I kept my mouth shut. Nathan looked so happy sitting beside her. His eyes sparkled the way they used to when he was a boy unwrapping Christmas presents. I told myself, if he loves her, then I will learn to love her too. That was my duty as a mother, to welcome the person who had stolen his heart. Over time, Amanda became a regular part of our lives. She attended family dinners, birthdays, and holidays. Outwardly, everything seemed fine, but I began to notice the subtle ways she distanced me from my son. If I made a suggestion about a meal, a plan, or even something small like what movie to watch, she would roll her eyes or dismiss it with a laugh. If I offered Nathan advice, she would interrupt, speaking for him as though he wasn't capable of answering himself. The first time I felt truly dismissed was on Thanksgiving. I had spent the entire day cooking, basting the turkey, preparing Nathan's favorite dishes, the ones I knew brought him comfort. When we all sat down to eat, Amanda leaned over to him and whispered something. He chuckled, and then he looked up at me and said, "Mom, Amanda thinks we should try something new next year. Maybe skip the traditional meal and do something modern." It felt like a knife twisting in my chest. It wasn't about the food. It was about tradition, about the countless years I had worked to make holidays special for him. But I swallowed my hurt and forced a smile. "If that's what you two want," I said. Inside, though, I felt a piece of the bond between us snap. Amanda wasn't openly cruel. No, her strength was in subtlety. A small smirk here, a quiet jab there, always delivered in a way that left me wondering if I was imagining it. But I wasn't. A mother knows when someone doesn't respect her. Richard saw it too. One night after dinner, when Amanda and Nathan had gone home, he looked at me across the table and said, "She doesn't like you." His words were blunt, almost harsh. I wanted to deny it, to argue, but instead, I sat in silence. Because deep down, I knew he was right. Still, I stayed quiet for Nathan's sake. I thought, if I stay patient, maybe she'll soften. Maybe time will change things. I told myself that love often brings challenges, and sometimes families take time to blend. I didn't want to be the mother-in-law who pushed her son away because she couldn't accept his wife. But the longer Amanda was in Nathan's life, the more the balance of our family shifted. Nathan stopped calling me as often. He stopped sharing the little details of his life, the ones that once bonded us. When I asked questions, his answers grew shorter. Sometimes, he avoided my eyes when Amanda was around, as if he felt guilty for the distance between us, but powerless to stop it. I knew she was pulling him closer to her world and further from mine, and as painful as it was, I bit my tongue. Because what else could I do? If I complained, Nathan might think I was jealous or controlling. If I pushed too hard, I might lose him altogether. So I told myself silence was strength, even though it didn't feel that way. Still, in the quiet moments, I couldn't ignore the chill Amanda brought into my home. Her presence was like a shadow creeping across the walls, slowly dimming the warmth I had worked so hard to build. And though I didn't know it then, that shadow was only the beginning. The slap, the humiliation, the betrayal on the bridge, those moments were seated here, in the quiet battles I tried to ignore. Have you ever met someone who, without saying a word, made you feel like you didn't belong in your own life anymore? That was Amanda. And though I wanted to believe she would change, deep down, I feared she never would. After Nathan and Amanda married, something in my life shifted, though I couldn't point to the exact day it began. It wasn't a sudden break, not an explosion, but rather a slow, creeping distance that grew like cracks in a wall you once believed unshakable. At first, I brushed it off as natural. Newlyweds needed their space. They were building their own rhythm, their own routines. I told myself not to interfere, not to expect things to stay the same. But then the silence grew louder. Nathan used to call me almost every evening. Sometimes it was quick, a question about cooking, a story from work, or even a laugh about something silly. After the wedding, those calls came less and less. Days passed without hearing his voice. Then weeks. I would sit by the phone at night, staring at it, waiting for it to ring, knowing it probably wouldn't. When I tried calling him, Amanda often answered. Her tone was polite, but there was an edge in her voice, like she was a gatekeeper deciding whether or not I was allowed through. "Nathan's busy," she would say. Or, "He's tired, he'll call you later." But later rarely came. And when Nathan did get on the phone, his words were shorter, thinner, stripped of the warmth they once carried. The visits home changed too. Before Amanda, Nathan came every Sunday, no matter what. It wasn't something I demanded, it was something he wanted. We would sit at the kitchen table for hours, talking about everything and nothing. Richard would pour coffee, and Nathan would joke that he still couldn't brew it as strong as his dad. Those Sundays felt like sacred time. After Amanda, the Sundays faded. At first, he would come once a month, then once every few months. And even then, Amanda was always with him, sitting close, her hand resting on his arm, like a silent claim. She smiled when Nathan looked at her, but when his eyes turned away, her expression tightened. I saw it, even if no one else did. When I tried to talk to Nathan alone, Amanda found ways to stay nearby. If I asked him to help me in the kitchen, she followed. If I suggested a walk with just the two of us, she invented a reason to tag along. I couldn't get through to my own son without her shadow standing between us. One evening, I told Richard what I was noticing. We were sitting in the living room, the television humming in the background, but I could hardly focus. "He's slipping away from us," I whispered. "Can't you see it?" Richard sighed, leaning back in his chair. He was always steadier than me, always the calm one. "He's married now, Evelyn," he said. "Things change. It doesn't mean he loves us any less. He's just building his life." But I couldn't shake the gnawing feeling in my chest. This wasn't just about a son growing up or finding independence. This was different. There was a secrecy about him now. His eyes avoided mine when I asked about his work, about his future, about how he was doing. His answers grew vague, sometimes defensive. Once, I caught a glimpse of something darker. Nathan had stopped by unexpectedly to drop off some old boxes he wanted to store in the garage. Amanda stayed in the car while he carried them in. When he set one down, the side tore slightly, and I saw papers spilling out. Receipts, documents, things I didn't recognize. When I bent down to help him gather them, he snatched them up too quickly, stuffing them back into the box before I could see. His voice was sharp when he said, "Don't worry about it, Mom." His tone, cold, defensive, was like a slap. That was the first time he had ever spoken to me like that. It rattled me, left me standing in silence as he carried the box back out. Later that night, lying in bed, I replayed that moment over and over. What was in those papers? Why did he react with such panic? My stomach tightened with dread, but when I mentioned it to Richard, he shook his head. "You're imagining things," he said. "You're reading too much into it." But I knew I wasn't. A mother knows. There were smaller clues, too. The times Nathan avoided family gatherings, claiming work but never giving details. The nervous glance he gave Amanda before answering even the simplest questions. The way Amanda's smile always seemed too triumphant when I stayed quiet, like she knew she was winning a battle I wasn't even fighting. One Sunday, when Nathan finally did come for dinner, I decided to press gently. "You've seemed so busy lately," I said, trying to keep my voice light. "Is everything all right?" For a moment he froze. His fork hovered in the air, and his eyes flicked toward Amanda. She gave him a small, almost imperceptible nod. Only then did he answer, his words flat and rehearsed. "Everything's fine, Mom. Just a lot going on." The way he said it chilled me. That wasn't my son's voice. That was the voice of someone being coached, controlled. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but instead, I forced a smile. I told myself patience was best, that pushing him would only drive him further away, but inside, I was unraveling. The boy I had raised, the boy I had sacrificed so much for, was slipping into shadows I couldn't reach, and I feared Amanda was pulling him there deliberately. Looking back now, those were the warning signs. The lies, the secrets, the distance. They weren't small things. They were cracks in the foundation of our family. I tried to patch them with silence and patience, but silence only gave them room to grow. Have you ever felt someone you love drifting so far away that no matter how hard you reached, you couldn't pull them back? That's what it felt like. And though I didn't know it then, the distance I feared was leading us straight toward the bridge, the night that would tear our lives apart forever. When Nathan called and offered to take Richard and me out for our anniversary, I felt a burst of joy. For weeks he had been distant. His voice over the phone carried the warmth I had been craving, and I thought maybe the coldness that had grown between us would finally melt away. Amanda was the one who suggested the drive. She said there was a new restaurant outside town, overlooking the river. Her tone was polite, almost too polite, and I told myself not to overthink it. I wanted peace. I wanted to believe my son still cared enough to celebrate with us. The car ride began with light chatter. Amanda tapped her nails against her phone while Nathan fiddled with the radio. He forced a smile when he caught my eyes in the rearview mirror. Richard cracked a joke about old songs, but no one laughed. I tried to fill the silence with small talk, yet the air inside that car felt heavy, as if the windows had trapped a storm that was waiting to break. As we approached the bridge, Nathan's knuckles tightened around the steering wheel. His face was pale, his jaw clenched. I leaned forward slightly and asked if he was all right. He gave a clipped nod. Amanda finally looked up from her phone, and the glance she gave him chilled me. It was brief but sharp, like a signal passed between them. Then everything unraveled in seconds. The car stopped mid-bridge. Nathan and Amanda both turned toward us. Before I could ask what was happening, the doors opened. Richard and I were yanked out, their hands firm, almost mechanical. My heart pounded so loud I could hear nothing else. Nathan wouldn't look me in the eyes. I whispered his name, begging for an explanation. Instead, I felt the shove. My own son's hands pressed against me, sending my body over the edge. Richard's cry mixed with mine as we plunged. The world spun. The rush of air tore at my skin. The water below seemed to rise like a black wall. Impact exploded through my body, pain surging everywhere at once. I sank, disoriented, before the river spit me back toward the surface. Through the haze, I heard Richard's ragged whisper. His face was bloodied, his chest heaving. "Don't move," he hissed. "Play dead." I froze. Nathan's car was still parked above. Their silhouettes leaned over the railing, watching. I let my body go limp, forcing myself to float as if life had already left me. Seconds dragged like hours until the car engine roared back to life and rolled away. That was when Richard turned to me, trembling, his voice breaking. "There's something you need to know. A truth I've kept hidden for 40 years. Bleeding. Broken. Shivering in that river, I felt the stab of betrayal twice. Once from my son's hands, and again from the man who had been my anchor for a lifetime. Every breath burned. My chest felt crushed, my limbs heavy, but I forced myself to stay still in the wreckage at the bottom of the bridge. Water seeped into my ears, carrying the metallic taste of blood into my mouth. My head rang with the echo of the fall, the sound of betrayal that no mother should ever hear. Richard's hand found mine, trembling, slick with blood. His grip was weak, but his voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "Don't move," he whispered, his lips almost against my ear. "Play dead." The command terrified me. I wanted to cry, to scream Nathan's name until the truth poured out of him. But Richard's tone left no room for argument. It was desperate, urgent, a survival instinct I didn't fully understand. Above us, I heard footsteps on the bridge. My son's voice carried faintly through the night air. "Do you think they're dead?" Nathan asked, his words hollow, stripped of all warmth. Amanda's answer was muffled, but sharp enough to freeze my blood. She urged him back into the car. They lingered only a moment longer. I held my breath, every muscle locked, praying my body looked lifeless enough to fool my own child. Then the sound came. The slam of doors, the turn of the ignition, the groan of tires rolling away. The engine faded into the distance until only the river and the rasp of my own breath remained. Silence fell, thick and suffocating. It pressed against me harder than the water or the pain. For the first time in my life, I was afraid of my son, not for him, but of him. I didn't dare move. Not until I was sure the night had swallowed him whole. The night grew still after the sound of Nathan's car faded. I forced myself to move, my body aching with every twitch. Richard coughed beside me, clutching his side, his face pale in the moonlight. "We're safe," I whispered, though the words felt hollow. "Safe? From our own son?" Richard squeezed my hand again, his grip trembling. "No," he rasped. "You don't understand. There's something you need to know." His voice cracked, low and ragged, like he'd been carrying this weight for decades. I turned toward him. dread crawling through me. "What are you talking about? Richard? Nathan tried to kill us. Our own son. He's not," Richard cut in, closing his eyes as if saying the words burned him. "He's not your son, at least, not in the way you believe." The ground seemed to tilt beneath me. My breath caught in my throat. "What do you mean?" "I carried him. I raised him. He's mine." Richard's face twisted with shame. 40 years ago, I made a choice. A mistake. The boy we raised is Nathan. He isn't your flesh and blood. I switched him. I thought I was protecting us, protecting you. But the truth is darker than you know." His words struck harder than the fall from the bridge. My heart throbbed in my chest, louder than the rush of the river. My son had tried to kill me, and now the man I trusted with my life was telling me Nathan wasn't even mine? Tears burned my eyes, but they wouldn't fall. My body was frozen, caught between grief, fury, and disbelief. "You lied to me for 40 years, I whispered. 40 years, Richard. You let me pour my soul into him, and now you tell me he isn't mine?" He turned his face away, unable to meet my eyes. "I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought if you never knew, you could love him freely, but I was wrong. God forgive me, I was wrong." At that moment, the pain of the fall was nothing compared to the pain in my chest. My son's betrayal and my husband's secret fused into one unbearable truth. I wasn't sure which wound cut deeper, the shove off the bridge or the stab in my heart. Lying at the bottom of that ravine, I made a choice. I would not let Nathan or whatever he was take everything from me. If Richard's lie had poisoned my past, I would not let it dictate my future. The days that followed were a blur of pain and whispers. Richard moved slowly, his ribs bruised, his eyes heavy with guilt. He wanted to confess more, to spill every detail of his secret. But I shut him down. Not yet. Not until I had proof. Not until I had a plan. I watched Nathan and Amanda from a distance. They thought they had succeeded. They smiled at neighbors, attended church as if nothing had happened, and even spoke of taking over my house once I was gone. Their arrogance was their weakness. People like that always leave traces. I started with small steps. Quiet conversations with old friends, trips to the county records office, a few calls to people Richard hadn't spoken to in years. Piece by piece, the truth came together. Debts, shady dealings, Amanda's hand guiding Nathan into darkness. My son hadn't become cruel on his own. She had fed his ambition, sharpened his greed, and pointed it all at me. Richard saw what I was doing, and the shame nearly broke him. "I did this," he said one night, tears streaking his face. "I gave you a son who wasn't yours, and now he's trying to bury us." I touched his hand, steady this time. "No, you gave me the strength to fight. That's what matters now." Weeks later, I had everything I needed. Bank records, signed documents, witnesses who had seen Amanda whispering poison into Nathan's ear. I even uncovered a connection to the secret Richard had been hiding all along. It was enough to ruin them both. The final confrontation came, not in private, but in the open, where masks couldn't be worn. At a family gathering, I stood, heart pounding, voice steady. I laid out the lies, the debts, the betrayal. I spoke of Richard's secret. I spoke of the bridge. Gasps rippled through the room. Faces turned toward Nathan and Amanda, their polished smiles cracking. Amanda's hands shook. Nathan's voice rose in protest, but the evidence silenced him. He wasn't a son anymore. He was an exposed liar, a criminal in the making. As I looked into Nathan's eyes one last time, I didn't see my boy. I saw the stranger Richard had admitted he was. And for the first time, I felt free. Revenge didn't come with fire or fists. It came with truth, with dignity reclaimed, with the knowledge that they could no longer hurt me. That night, Richard wept against my shoulder. I didn't forgive him, not fully, but I let myself breathe. I had survived the fall, and I had survived the betrayal. Amanda was the first to crumble. Once my evidence spread, her world unraveled faster than I expected. Friends stopped returning her calls. Her family, who had praised her beauty and cleverness, turned their backs when her schemes came to light. The debts she had hidden now sat squarely in her lap. Collectors circled, and the smug confidence she once wore like perfume faded into fear. I watched from a distance. There was no joy in it, but there was justice. She had built her life on manipulation, and now every lie collapsed beneath her. She tried to cling to Nathan, but even he began to see her for what she was, a poison that had slowly seeped into his bones. Nathan's reckoning came slower and heavier. He tried to keep up appearances, pretending the bridge never happened, pretending I was the problem. But whispers spread. People asked questions he couldn't answer. My silence became louder than his excuses. One night, he came to me. His eyes looked hollow, his shoulders hunched. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He asked for understanding. "I didn't mean for it to go that far," he said, voice shaking. I thought it was the only way." I stared at him, my son, my blood, or so I had believed, and all I could see was the boy I had raised slipping further away with every word. Richard's secret had explained the missing piece, but it didn't soften the wound. Nathan had chosen his path. He had chosen Amanda, and he had chosen to throw me into the dark. "I gave you everything," I whispered, "and you gave me this." He broke down then, sobbing like a child, but it was too late. The bridge had already fallen between us. In the weeks that followed, Amanda left. Some say she ran from the debt collectors. Others say she simply couldn't bear the shame. Nathan stayed, but he was no longer welcome in the places that once embraced him. His name, once a source of pride for me, now carried the weight of betrayal. And me? I walked through town with my head high again. People looked at me, not with pity, but with respect. They knew the truth. They knew I had survived. But survival carries scars. My family was broken beyond repair. Richard's lie, Nathan's betrayal, Amanda's greed, they had left me with pieces I could never fit back together. Yet in that brokenness, I found strength I never knew I had. The slap of water under the bridge still echoes in my dreams, but so does Richard's whisper, "Play dead." What was meant to silence me gave me the time to rise again. Bittersweet as it was, I had reclaimed myself. And that was enough. They threw me away to protect their secret. But what they didn't know was that a mother's silence is never permanent. Justice comes, even if it crawls through blood and betrayal. If you were in my place, would you forgive a son who tried to kill you, or would you make him face the truth he buried? Subscribe now for more stories that test the limits of family, loyalty, and revenge. And before you go, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from, and what would you have done?